Hey, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of Tall Tales with Taco. My name is Mitch Taco Bell. I am a retired Marine Lieutenant Colonel. I'll be your host tonight, and I have got a fantastic show lined up for you tonight. This is Lieutenant Colonel Joe Harrison. He was actually an instructor of mine back in 1988 when I was at Hotel Company at the basic school in Quantico, Virginia. And Joe made such an impression on me as a young lieutenant. As a matter of fact, all the instructors there were the most incredible officers that one could find. You did not have a mediocre officer at the basic school because the first impressions of a young second lieutenant who just got done with college, he's already graduated from OCS. He goes as a butter bar. These guys are instrumental in developing the core basic ingredients of young officers. Now, that can be good or bad. In about 99% of the cases, you had the most outstanding guys leading you through the 6 months that you were there. And without further ado, I would like to bring on with you Lieutenant Colonel Joe Harrison. We also served together in Iraq in 2005. That's where we were reunited, and we've been friends ever since, fast friends. It's just a fantastic honor to know him. And he comes from a long line of military, especially Marines. His dad was in Vietnam as an infantryman. Without further ado, Lieutenant Colonel Joe Harrison. Joe, how are you doing, brother?
Hey, good to see you, Mitch. Thanks for having me, buddy.
Oh, are you kidding, man? This show is being graced by your presence on this show has just elevated it probably about tenfold, man. I can't thank you enough for coming on.
You're shining me on, man. You're shining me on.
Well, I mean, think about this, okay? Like I posted something on Facebook the other night. I've really gotten big into this whole Camp Upshur OCS thing, right? Because Camp Upshur was such an experience to go through as a junior, your very first experience into the Marine Corps. And you go there and you're scared crapless. I mean, I still remember JJ did buckle, right? Justice, judgment, dependability, integrity, decisiveness, tact, initiative, enthusiasm, bearing, unselfishness, courage, knowledge, loyalty, endurance. And your fifth general order is, so you had to learn all that stuff back then. And hell, that was 30-some years ago, right?
So believe it or not, my dad went to TBS there before Camp Barrett was built. TBS was out of, well, I'm sure, before Camp Upshur, it was somewhere else, but
right.
And then he later came back on the staff, which we can talk about later, at TBS. He was one of the first iterations. I think Camp Barrett was built in 59, I think, with the old buildings that we knew,
right.
That we know. But, Camp Upshur, man, that was, and then PLC for him was at Parris Island. For my dad was at Parris Island.
Really?
So, yeah.
They sent him to PLC at.
Yeah, I think he did both. I can't remember if he did two. I think he did 2 summers at Parris Island for PLC. So, he came in, well, he signed up for PLC during Korea, but got commissioned right after Korea in 54. So,
well, actually, no, they were still at Camp Upshur, because I've got a photograph of a PLC class in 1953 at Camp Upshur.
Yeah, he might have been one of them there. I know he did one. He did one iteration at Parris Island, though. I still got cool. Like herringbone utilities that were his and stuff. The old stuff. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Old school. So your experience, you grew up in Northern Virginia. You're a Nova boy like me. I was Arlington. Well, Charleston, South Carolina, Little Creek amphibious base with the Marines, and then Arlington, Virginia. Did you go to Tech? You were at Tech?
Right. I went to Virginia Tech. Yep.
Okay.
So Marine, Marine kid. I don't really like the term Marine brat, but, which is awesome. My dad clearly is my number one hero and was my number one hero and influence. So he was an SPC at TBS when I was born. And then went out and did a tour at Camp Pendleton with 1st Marine Division. In between that time, he spent a year in Okinawa. And I told you before, one of the battalions in 3rd Marines, that's where he did his first tour in Vietnam. Yeah, that's my dad.
Look at that stud.
did a tour with the Vietnamese Marine Rifle Company as an observer in 1964. That's him on the right. That picture was taken sometime in 64. I told you the Marine Corps actually did something pretty smart talking to him. They knew they were going to go to Vietnam, so they took all the rifle company commanders in his battalion and sent them to Vietnam for 3 months. So those are the company officers of the company. My dad bird dogged for 3 months in Vietnam. Then he went back to Okinawa and redeployed. But
is he carrying a Thompson submachine gun?
yeah, Thompson submachine gun with no stock.
Wow. How did he like that? Did he say it shot all right, or?
Yeah, I mean, it's, that's just a close-in personal defense weapon. I don't think he ever fired it much. It was mostly, their contact was mostly VC. I got a VC flag that, that he took notes on when it was captured and stuff. And then he went back to Vietnam, was the OPSO of something called Special Landing Force Bravo in 1968, 69. So the Navy was putting together, got in the fight with amphibs. He was spent most of his time on the USS Tripoli, but BLT they were doing combat operations off the Tripoli, and then came back to TBS as a company commander, and then retired in 74 when I was 13, I think. So, anyways, kind of in and around Quantico, growing up, and couldn't wait. Yeah, that's him. That's him at TBS somewhere.
Now, tell us about your birthday that you got to spend with your dad.
So my dad, range. Yeah, that was probably right around this time. He took me out of school, and the lieutenants were doing squad attacks. I think they still had M14s and M60 machine guns. And okay, you're, get up there, put a helmet on, son, and fire away. And it was a blast. My recruiter had the easiest job in the history of recruiting. I mean, I told you, I just wanted to be a Marine, and ended up, my parents signed off, enlisted at 17. And then I think I told you my mother's family. So my mom grew up on a farm, no electricity, stuff on Eastern Carolina, right, and was the first person in her family to get a college degree at age 40. So she had gotten a degree, maybe when I was 10 or something, and just went and talked to my recruiter and said, no, please, he's got to go to college, because, there's nobody in my family that had really much of an education on her side. He tore my contract up, came back to me and said, here you go. Joe, sign this. You're going to be an 85-day reservist. And I didn't care. I didn't know. My mom said, go to college, right? I'd never seen Blacksburg. Just somehow got accepted. I wasn't college bound. I didn't care about, unfortunately, all I want to do is be a Marine. High school was a method for me to get in the Marine Corps. And so at the time, 1979, still post-Vietnam, I went to Parris Island, spent, the plan was 85 days, you come, you're a college boy or whatever, you're going to go right to your university. And then the next summer, you will go to your MOS school, right? And my unit was Detachment Company I out of Johnson City, Tennessee, right? So I drive from Blacksburg down to Tennessee one weekend a month. Well, the next summer comes around and they're like, we don't have any money. You remember even when you came in the Marine Corps, but a lot of people have a hard time remembering how poor the Marine Corps was.
Right.
And so they're like, ominous dominus, you're an 0311. But I did that for my first 2 years of college, and then got in the PLC program for the last 2 years. So got commissioned out of Tech, and right down the road from you, man. You're a JMU grad.
Yeah. Yeah, you were right there. I was actually at Radford for 2 years.
Yeah, well, that's even closer,
Yeah, it was close. And then transferred up to Madison, finished up there in 88. So Berger was my OSO in 86.
Yeah, I saw your interview with him. Yep,
kind of funny. Yeah,
it is. It's
General Berger now coming out of the Marine Corps.
It's a small place. It really is.
It is. So go back when you were enlisted. A lot of guys say, I would have joined to be enlisted to be a better officer as Mustang, or, to see what it's like. What takeaways did you come into the officer program with of guys that you observed, staff NCOs or
Yeah.
officers, what traits did you take away from that when you became an officer?
So, I mean, I guess strangely, I don't really consider myself a prior enlisted Marine. I mean, I wouldn't trade anything that I did, but I was there, and I didn't get the MOS score. So what happened was I had two really good friends of mine that dropped out of college. They were going to, I think, Appalachian State. They were in my reserve unit. Joe Wheeler and Tad Perkins. I'll never forget these guys. And we're Lance Corporals running around on the weekends, and they dropped out of college and went on active duty. And one of the battalions, they both went out and were snipers out in 7th Marines, right in the early 80s while I was finishing college. And the only reason I didn't do it was, I think my mom intuitively knew this. You just never quit anything you start. So if
Right.
he starts college, he's not going to quit. But anyways, I got together with Joe right around the time I graduated college. He's now a sergeant who's been a sniper in an infantry battalion out in 7th Marines out at 29 Palms. And Joe tells me, and I'm like, okay, man, I'm going to be a new lieutenant. Tell me, give me what do you think? And Joe, two things Joe said was, somebody's always watching you. Your Marines will know everything you do. You'll be out on Liberty somewhere, or you'll be on the other side of the base, and somebody will see you do something, and your Marines in your platoon at the time, I was going to be a platoon commander, will know about it. And boy, was that true. I found that to be true my entire, the rest of the 27 years. And then the other thing he said was, whether you have 5 minutes, 5 hours, 5 days, or 5 weeks, if you have time, you think about your decisions, because they impact guys like me. And I will those two things stayed with me my entire career.
Wait a minute. Say that again. If you have
5 minutes, 5 hours, 5 days, or 5 weeks to make a decision, you always take the time to think about the decisions you make and the consequences. And in Joe, we had been peers. He was a sergeant at the time, and
right.
I don't even think I'd been commissioned yet, because they affect guys like me, meaning enlisted Marines.
Right.
They affect us. And I found that to be, I couldn't have started my career off with, two better pieces of advice, to be honest with you, from him. Good guys. I have great memories of that.
That's fantastic. Now, what about on the officer side? Were there any officers in your unit that you still know today, or that you took stuff from?
Yeah, well, I've been really, really fortunate. I started off in 2nd Battalion, 4th Marines. They were in 2nd Marines at Camp Lejeune at the time. They've since moved, but they were a 4th Infantry Battalion. And the staff, I had a MECEP company commander, and the staff NCOs were phenomenal. I mean, those guys would pull you in and say, "Hey, Lieutenant, our first sergeant was not hesitant to counsel us as new second lieutenants." I mean, we got pulled in his office as all the lieutenants. I'll never forget one day, and he's screaming and yelling at us, and my company commander sitting back listening to this, and my XO got up to say something, because the first sergeant screaming, yelling, and cussing at us about we're not listening to our platoon sergeants. And my company commander just walked right in between us and said, "Sit down, shut up. He's speaking for me." Meaning, the whole value of the officer staff NCO relationship. Quit trying to do my staff NCO's jobs. You'll get twice as much done. They're there to help you. They're there to teach you. And they really were. They were there to teach us how to be good platoon commanders, good officers, and set the tone for everything we did. And, boy, I mean, I'll tell you too, later on, I was fortunate. That's all I did in 2-4. I was a rifle, weapons, and 81's platoon commander. And, I had a little bit of time under my belt when I took over the 81's platoon in 2-4. And I'm sitting there, and these guys were good. I'd known about them because we were in a sister company, Echo Company. And I got over there. I've been there maybe a week or two, and my platoon sergeant, a guy named Staff Sergeant Roland Tidmore, another gem of a Marine. I'm
Mhm.
going 100 miles an hour because we're on air alert or whatever we're doing. And I've got 10 pages of notes to pass. And I've got all my staff NCOs and section leaders in there. There's probably 5 or 6 NCOs and staff NCOs in my office. And it dawned on me after like 4 or 5 minutes, nobody's taking notes. And so I'm going through this and I look up and I finally go, hey, Staff Sergeant Tidmore, is there a problem? And he looks at me and goes, it's already done, sir. It's already done. And I went, first your inclination is to put your head between your tail. But mine was, man, I got something really good here.
Yeah.
If I can stay, I need to get ahead of these guys and start doing what officers get paid to do. Look a week out, look 2 weeks out, look 10 weeks out. And that was a phenomenal platoon. It went on to win the Division Crew Serve Weapons competition and set for 2nd Marine Division in 86 or 86. Yeah, great Marines, And I'll tell you the other thing too, a lot of people, I won't mention the Marine's name, although I love them to death, but I got to the platoon and there was a former corporal who was a private, and everybody loved this guy, and he had gotten, I won't even say what he got busted for. Part of it was was false accusations. Part of it's true. But he was just what I would call an influencer. And
Mhm.
if Pratt went, that entire 75-man platoon would go. If Pratt was having a bad day, everybody had a bad day. Now, he got meritoriously promoted. I think I was there 7 months. He was a Lance Corporal before I left. He was that good. He made it most of his rank back. But, that's something a lot of leaders overlook is, there are people, good and bad, and there are, Marines just the opposite of Pratt. There are people out there that will, if you don't look for them, you're not going to see the, Lance Corporal Bonats who's really telling everybody that the captain screwed up or the lieutenant screwed up. And they can do a tremendous amount of damage. But likewise, there are influencers just like that Marine was that I had. I was fortunate enough to be able to find those guys. And I think they're almost in every unit. And you got to look for them, because the bad ones can really hurt you because they're trying to undermine everything. But the good ones can just send your unit to new levels. And, I've just found that to be a kind of constant throughout my career.
Now, from time you joined 77,
79, yeah.
79.
I'm not that old, man.
Yeah, you feel old sometimes, but
I feel old every day.
when you joined the Corps, and even up to when I was at TBS, I saw the pendulum starting to swing. Where we went to the Hawk and we had 2 beers. You didn't get out of control. The only guys that got out of control at the Hawk were warrant officers there because they just didn't care. But you'd go have maybe 2 beers, but you were on your P's and Q's because of the way that the momentum of that pendulum was swinging. The days of my dad and his shipmates having blowout parties at the house at base housing, those and the MPs stopping you and giving you a ride home, that's gone, right? So
yeah, that stopped probably right around the time you were at TBS. I would say 80, 88 time frame.
Yeah,
there's some good and bad in that. There's a lot of good at that, don't get me wrong, but there's a lot of things. If you can do it in a controlled environment, there's a lot of unit camaraderie, as long as nobody's going to get hurt, obviously, or hurt anybody else. But I'll go back to, there were some people, and I'll just say it. I got thumped at recruit training. I got thumped, and I was not, alone. I don't agree with that. I kind of understood it because half the people in my platoon probably couldn't pass a high school equivalency test at the time. There were guys that were right off the street that the judges told. They told me this, fellow recruits, you're going to go in the Marine Corps, you're going to jail. And so I'm not justifying it, but, the only thing a lot of those guys understood at the time was violence. And, we rightfully so as a Marine Corps got away from that. And, I mean, and you talked about the 80s at TBS when General Gray was the commandant, implemented maneuver warfare and the thinking man's Marine Corps, um, mission orders, commander's intent. It was a great time of change, and I'm so fortunate to have been at TBS, during that time frame. I mean, we would sit around for hours and talk about, can a fire team leader have a commander's intent? I mean, when there were legitimate discussions about FM1, which is still probably, in my opinion, the most important book or piece of doctrine that ever was written in the Marine Corps.
Right.
And you were a part of that. You were towards the beginning of your career. It was just phenomenal.
Well, I was thinking back as a leader, some of those guys that got busted down to private made it back. In this Corps day and age, if that had happened to them, they're probably separated, adcept or something, and not even given the chance. And I think that's a disservice.
I do too.
You do have some really phenomenal guys, and we all make mistakes. We all make mistakes. So if I live in a glass house, I don't want to be the guy living in a glass house throwing bricks at somebody.
I totally agree with you. And, I mean, I want to be careful not to give names or impugn anybody, but, we had some Vietnam staff NCOs who were phenomenal guys that I worked with, as a second lieutenant and first lieutenant. And I mean, if a Marine dropped his rifle, we knew at the time this was probably wrong, and you're peeking over, you got 3 weeks or 6 weeks in the fleet under your belt, and this guy's got a Marine at attention, and he's slapping him for dropping his rifle. And then you go and you talk to this staff NCO who had 2 tours in Vietnam in an infantry battalion afterwards, and he looks at you and says, "Lieutenant, that rifle's going to keep that Marine alive. I don't need to run him to NJP and ruin him for that." And the Marine and to a Marine in that company, Marines loved him. I saw them carry him around on a stretcher like a pharaoh, and Marines would walk up to him and, "Hey, Gunny," at the time he was a Gunny, "can I get a Gunny slap?" But I mean, just one of the toughest, best Marines I'd ever met. But his logic was, he had seen a lot of combat in Vietnam, and he was not going to do anything that would hurt his Marines. Mm-hmm. He wanted to bring all his Marines home alive, and NJP was not the way for him to do it. He would take care of that as a staff NCO. Again, he retired as a sergeant major. Unfortunately, he's deceased now. But I mean, there's a guy who probably wouldn't be a lance corporal or corporal today, and he was a phenomenal. I learned a ton of stuff from him about it. I'll tell you one story. I thought he hated me. And we were in Subic Bay for 2 months on a Westpac deployment, and he invites me to go to the chief's mess with him. "Hey, Lieutenant," and he smoked Marlboro. Half of everybody, people forget too. Everybody smoked. Right. And it looked like a rubber band in his mouth when he talked, and it was profane. But he invited me to the chief's mess one Saturday or Sunday. I think it was a Sunday morning. So I'm thinking, wow, I thought he hated me, right? Because I'm the guy that's going over and asking him, dumb lieutenant questions. And we sat down at the table, and, in between bites of eggs, he's smoking a Marlboro. So, "Lieutenant, what's the most important thing to you in the Marine Corps?" And I thought about it for a second, and I go, if you had asked me that 5 months ago, Gunny, I'd have told you it was accomplishing the mission, but it's not. It's taking care of your Marines. Because if you take care of your Marines, the mission will get accomplished every time. And he just kind of takes a puff and looks up. "You're going to be all right, Lieutenant Harrison. You're going to be all right." That was my seal of approval for the rest of my career. Phenomenal guy. I cannot say enough good about that guy, and looking out for us as lieutenants, training us. And
that's what, we always talk about the lessons and things that you take from different people, both officer and enlisted. I remember my gunny, the OSA, saying, "Sir, just listen to, attach yourself to a good sergeant or staff sergeant, because sometimes the gunnies will be too lazy. They'll pass it off to the staff sergeant or the sergeant to get done. But if you get in with a good one, listen to what the guy says, and then kind of lean on him for a little bit of counsel. And that definitely paid off.
Well, I'll tell you, I told you earlier before we started, I went to Guantanamo Bay from there, from Lejeune, and I ended up having to relieve somebody, right, as a lieutenant, and it bothered me a lot. And I kept having these, no, I'm not wacko. I have these imaginary conversations because it's my decision, right? I'm a lieutenant. I'm down there to try to help fix this, and I don't want to be too specific because I don't want to impugn anybody, but he clearly wasn't getting it. And I would have these conversations with myself. What would my gunny say, right? The gunny I just described to you.
Right.
And inevitably the answer was, and I never, you couldn't pick up the phone, or not that I would have, but back then, because there was obviously no internet. Every time I would ask that question, relieve him, sir. He's hurting your Marines. Relieve him, sir. He's hurting your Marines. Relieve. That was the answer I kept getting back. And it was, I ended up making that decision, and it was the right decision to make. But,
well, for the folks who have seen A Few Good Men.
Yeah.
Joe was down there after that whole incident. Right. Nobody died. Let's
Correct.
Make the record straight. Nobody died. The code reds were real.
Yes.
And the Marines, that movie was based off some factual things about some people and events and things. But
I would say it's probably somewhere around 50%, 60% accurate. So what happened was there was this rumor going around in the summertime of '86 that, Panama was kind of going off and on, and we ended up sending Marines. We thought the TAD from the division, a couple of guys from our battalion thought they were going to Panama. Well, anyways, I got pulled in and I got briefed by the ADC of 2nd Marine Division, right? And he had been down there. It was General Keyes. He had been down there, I guess, on an Article 32 investigation. And I got pulled in and said, hey, look, you got to go down there. He kind of briefed me on what was going on. And then, of course, I end up flying. I flew in there like on October 13th or 17th of 1986, about 3 months after this had happened. And the first thing the new colonel had done, so the colonel, I'm trying to equate this to the movie for people who just don't know, but the colonel that Jack Nicholson played in the movie was relieved of command. And the new colonel, who I never met the colonel that Jack Nicholson played. He came in for some court martials, and I think I met him for about 5 minutes at one point later. But he had been relieved. Well, the new colonel, I'm a first lieutenant. I'm going to take over a rifle security platoon, is what it was called. And I check into the barracks headquarters, and the new colonel pulls me in and hands me the investigation. And I sat in the CMS vault all day. He said, you're not leaving to go to your platoon until you read this investigation. So I read the 500 or 600 page, I forget how long it was. And then I go over to my platoon. So the CO, so they were thumping this guy. This guy, it was poor leadership. I mean, this guy's probably, my guess, I never met him, was probably, a very average to below average, probably a little bit below average Marine, who all he probably needed was leadership, and he got thumped instead. And, he wasn't content, and he ended up, as the movie states, he wrote his congressman, and he made some accusations, which I think, that Marines were firing their weapons and some other stuff were probably true. They were shooting deer from, these guard posts at the time. And then he ends up, NCIS got involved. And so NCIS tells the company commander, who tells, who isn't supposed to know, who tells the platoon commanders, and they're all on everybody down there was on a first name basis and buddies. They would all go to the E Club, the officers, company officers. And, so he gets the platoon commanders fired up and says, nobody's supposed to know this. Well, what does the platoon commander do? The Kiefer Sutherland character gets all his NCOs together with his platoon sergeant, and chews them out and tells them what's going on. Now he's like their big brother, and they've just let their big brother and dad down, right? Meaning the company commander, because they're drinking buddies. Oh, by the way, nobody in that office except the lieutenant and the platoon sergeant had ever been anywhere else in the Marine Corps. Guantanamo Bay was their first duty station.
Really?
And so he makes a comment like, he better not fall down nothing better happen to him tonight, but if he falls down the steps, oh well. So, and again, this is 3 or 2 months before I got down there. So what do the Marines do? Well, they just let their big brother down who drinks beer with them all the time. Their misplaced loyalty. And they decide to go hold this code red, which was an actual term. But the thing that I never got over was, the staff NCOs I grew up with would have stopped every one of those Marines and said, over my dead body, go back to your barracks, leave him alone. The lieutenant doesn't know what he's talking about. And nobody did anything. And, fortunately, nobody died. But the thing was depicted correctly.
So what leadership stuff did you guys implement down there to turn the morale around, to turn the Marines around? What did you guys do?
It's funny, and I'll say this Marine's name. So I get down to my platoon, right? And I mentioned before this Panama, when I was in 2nd Division, we had Marines that we thought were going to Panama, right, to reinforce whatever was going on down in Panama. Well, I get to my platoon, and there's Lance Corporal Kenny Wood from Golf Company 2-4, and I just left 2-4. And the reason Kenny Wood was known throughout the battalion because he was like Daryl Dawkins was the big basketball player at the time. And Kenny had broken a backboard in the regimental gym playing basketball. So everybody in the battalion knew who Kenny Wood was, right. Lance Corporal, right? So he's in my platoon. And I'm like, Wood, what are you doing down here? I thought you went to Panama. And he goes, oh, sir, and I'm talking, these Marines they don't know anything. They're all, they're all talk, right? They're all talk. And it wasn't their fault. They had never been anywhere in the Marine Corps. That's all they knew was the Guantanamo Bay Marine Corps. So, and there was a lot of malcontents, right? And I mentioned before influencers, because this kind of comes back into play. Well, anyways, we would run week on, week off guard duty. So we would take our platoons out and we would run a running guard on 5 guard posts. If you look at a map of Guantanamo Bay on the eastern side, that's windward. And your platoon's constantly rotating guards. Mm-hmm. And then at the end of the week, the other platoon in the company would come out. You'd field day the little squad bays. You'd make sure everything was police called. And then you'd get on the vehicle, go back, clean weapons, and you'd have the weekend off. Well, I had arranged it with a new lieutenant came in, a guy named Dan McGuire, great guy, had the other platoon, had 1st platoon. The 5 tons came out there to pick us up. The Marines put their sea bag on it. I had the platoon sergeant fall the platoon in. On me, we had 250 cals, it was a composite crew serve weapons platoon, right? 2 60-millimeter mortars, and I think there was maybe 35 of us. The 5 tons took off. We're walking Marines. And boy, that started solving the problems fast. And I got that from, I pulled Lance Corporal Wood aside, who had been in 2nd Battalion, 4th Marines in another rifle company. He's now one of my, and I'm like, Wood, what do we got to do to solve this? Sir, they're all talk, they're all show and no go. And man, you're carrying a 50 cal receiver, even though it was only like 7 miles, right? And you want to get back, and you're the guy that runs your mouth all the time that the lieutenant's screwed up or everybody's screwed up, and yet you can't carry your own weight, much less anybody else's. People stop listening pretty quick. And so through that, we would have graffiti on posts. Marine, I saw my name had, Marines had put me in infamy, with bayonets standing on these 60-foot guard towers. Hey, we're sanding these posts all week, right? You're going to get all the graffiti off. Well, guess what? My buddy came out there to relieve us, and the word was out with his platoon, right? No, I gave my platoon all week to sand these posts down. Right. And if they didn't pass inspection, we were supposed to leave at 1100. Oh, no, we left at midnight. I mean, there's Lance Corporals up in the up in these 60-foot guard towers with flashlights, you missed the spot. Well, guess what? The next week, and you know, it wasn't just my platoon. Both platoons had leadership problems.
Right.
But we fixed a lot of that stuff by that. And the Lance Corporals fixed it themselves. And I'll tell you the other thing I learned too, a lot of people don't spend enough time watching or listening to their Marines. Like, you know, we would do guard shift changeover, let's say at midnight. And so the guard would, sergeant of the guard, and then the corporal of the guard would be inspecting Marines. I'll just say 2,300. Well, my office, you know, I was awake all night. My office was right outside where they did the inspection in the guard mount, and it's hot down there. And I had one rack and a little room the size of a shoebox. Set my alarm, turn the AC off, and listen to guard mount. I knew everything that was going on. I knew the Marines, the NCOs who weren't doing a good job inspecting their Marines. I knew the Marines who weren't doing a good job because they had, you know, Playboys or whatever in their packs that were going on post. Or I would just, you know, on other occasions, I would get up and sneak out through the squad bay and sit under it at night in the shadows of a tree and watch them. And, you know, not necessarily say anything. A lot of people think if you see something wrong, you got to jump in immediately and say something. And there's a lot of value, unless it's a safety issue or somebody's going to lose their life. There's a lot of value in waiting and thinking about it. And then, you know, because maybe it's not what it appears. You know, maybe it's just something simple. It's not, you don't need to go screaming at somebody and turn to find out that you're totally misinformed. But I found that would be, you know, you just kind of look back to what my buddy told me, whether you have 5 minutes, 5 hours, or 5 days, and you start to learn, and then you can figure out how to take corrective action on this. That's going to be lasting corrective action and not cause any harm.
So from Gitmo, let's see, Gitmo, you went to the basic school.
I did, yeah.
So when you were at the basic school, just not brag. I mean, we had Colonel Ebert, who took a 51 cal. Gary Ebert took a 51 cal. Now, for those of you, you all would not know Colonel Ebert, but Colonel Ebert always had a smile on his face.
Yeah.
Great looking guy. Smile. When he inspected you, he'd be in front of you and he'd go, "Hey, Lieutenant, how's it going?" And you just couldn't help but lose your bearing and, "Hi, sir," you know, and you wanted to smile back at him. He would run a 300 PFT, smoke all the lieutenants, and he had one lung. He got hit by a 51 cal, North Vietnamese 51 cal. And this is talking about how the Marine Corps is. As he's in the triage, he's tagged, he's dead, he's not going to make it, not worth operating on him. And one of his TBS buddies pulled a gun on a doctor and said, "That's my friend Terry Ebert. You will put the knife to him or I will shoot you." And he did, and he saved him. And then, you know, there's a reason God let him live, because just a fantastic officer and inspiration to us.
I don't know if he ever did this to your company, but we would be teaching a class, whatever, you know, I'm on the platform as a tactics instructor, and you'd give the lieutenants a 10-minute break because it's an hour and a half class or whatever. And then everybody pile back in the class and you'd go teaching, and you're walking up the aisles and you point at a lieutenant to ask him a question. And there's Colonel Ebert. Like, he had just wandered in there, and he's exactly like you said. He's just smiling at you, just observing class. And he'd sit there for 45 minutes. And, you know, we never got I never got directly corrected for anything because of that. He wanted to know what his instructors were doing. But I told you this before. This is worth noting. So I get to TBS and I'm still a first lieutenant. And one of the great things about I think you're probably in this realm too, you know, DOTMA hadn't, the promotion standards weren't the same across the services. And so, you know, the Marine Corps took longer to promote people to field grade officer. So we got to spend a longer time as lieutenants and captains. And I was a first lieutenant anyways when I still checked in there, and I'm running with mostly captains as fellow instructors. But I get, you're kind of overwhelmed because you're out, everybody wants you to be an assistant instructor. So you're the one that's going to go out in the field and do a field problem with lieutenants. I know you know this, but I'm just trying to, explain this for anybody who might be watching. Well,
Sure.
anyways, it was night ambush patrols. I get tagged. I got to go out there and bird dog. So I've got him. I think he was still a captain, might have been a major, but I've got a Marine major that's a tactics instructor that he's going to show me the ropes. We're going to go out. We're going to do this patrol with the lieutenants. And the next night, I'm going to be the guy that's grading the lieutenants. And there's another major from the basic school tagging along. So we go out on this patrol and, I'm trying to take notes in the dark to make sure I've got my act together for the next night. And we get to the final position. We've been out in the field for maybe 2 hours watching the lieutenants move to set in this ambush position. And it's time to go from the OR objective rally point, the last 100 meters to where the lieutenants are laid in, and going to conduct this training ambush. And the guy on my left, as I told you, is Major John Kelly. And the guy on my right was Major Boomer Milstead. Well, John Kelly, as people will know that name, was President Trump's chief of staff.
Right.
He was an instructor on the staff at TBS. And then Boomer Milstead, who I later, about a year later, went to be an SBC for him. And Taco and I were in Second Off Forward. He was the CG for Second Off Forward. He retired as a lieutenant general. Two great Americans.
Awesome. Yep.
Yeah. That was my first day at the basic school as an instructor on the staff.
Oh, no kidding. Wow. Who else did we have on there that ended up?
Boy, man. I mean, there were Mike Pesnola. Well, you're going to know probably Lieutenant General Craparata, who was on the staff and then went to IOC. They were lieutenants and captains the same time I was. Lieutenant General Osterman, Lieutenant General Clarity. All three of them just retired, I believe. Duffy White. I could go on and on and on. And the thing about that was, again, I talked earlier about the value. I was so fortunate to have great staff NCOs. So fortunate. Yeah. I was as equally fortunate to have great peers. All of those guys, every day you come to work, you got a smile on your face. You can't help but think you're, doing something important, training lieutenants, and you're running. Guys next to you that are that good just make you better every day. And it was just a phenomenal experience coming to work every day, teaching lieutenants, the future of the Marine Corps, and they still are to this day here, TBS, young Marines and the young officers going through training are the future of the Marine Corps.
Right. Right. And how long did it take you to get qualified as an instructor? So you're an assistant instructor.
Yeah.
Tell us, some of the leadership challenges you had there.
Well, you're trying to balance. Yeah. So I think we had 30, 35 captains. I mean, it varies. It's a little bit different today, I'm sure, but they're running all the tactics instruction going on at the basic school. So they can't run patrolling. You might need 15 or 20 instructors to run a patrolling event. Well, and then there's other companies doing the same thing. We were constantly in the field, but your primary duty is, if you're going to teach, like I taught fire support coordination, call for fire, all the infantry weapons. And that's your primary job, running those ranges, but you spend most of your time doing everything else. And so we were in, if you're doing your job right, and I guess fortunately for me and my wife, I wasn't married at the time, because, you're in there on Saturdays and Sundays rehearsing your classes. You get murder boarded by your peers who are not going to let pass you and let you teach this class. And, there is something to peer pressure, right? Yeah. You're letting us down because we don't have time to do your job for you. So you're in on the weekends, and we would come in if we're doing something like patrolling, or we would do squat-a-thon, where you do squat attacks for 2 days in a row. Well, you're in there on the weekends, and you might be in blue jeans and grab a canteen, and you're running through the woods with a map and compass. so that you don't have to do that when you come out the next week. You're prepared. So you can be watching the lieutenants and not looking at your map, trying to figure out where you are, just, preparation. But
little secrets the guys never knew.
well, and I left that and I went to work for Major Milstead, General Milstead. And he's a Cobra pilot for your viewers. Great officer. Perhaps you've heard of him. No, we won't go there. But, my name is Boomer Milstead. Perhaps you've heard of me. But, Milstead had been in the 3 shop for a year. In fact, General Amos was the 3, I think, for a while there at the time, former commandant. But anyways, Major Milstead had been watching every company that went through the basic school. And I told you before, he had notebooks.
Right.
And he probably by the end of his career, maybe had 12 little green memorandum books. And it's sayings the Marines would say, all sorts of detailed. I'm sure there was a ton of aviation stuff in there, but he had taken notes for 12 months on what the good companies at TBS did, student companies.
Right.
And then he would take notes of what I'll never do. And I mean, he would do stuff like he rearranged the whole schedule for so lieutenants could have the day after mess night off. Or we did, I think he was the first student company that went down to Chancellorsville. I was his PT officer. We went down to Chancellorsville battlefield to do our 25-mile hikes down there. He was one of the first guys that did that instead of just doing them at Quantico. And it was all, he had thought this through for a year. It was amazing I'm kind of like, wow, he actually put, we had Hawaiian shirts. He came back from the PX one day, all excited. And, it was a tanker, a supply officer, and a bunch of dumb grunts.
Right.
Being one of them. And he had gone main side and to the PX, and he comes back with this really Hawaiian shirt, and he tells our XO, is a guy named Dave Gill, tanker, XO, these are $22.50, but I've talked to PX, if we buy 250 of them, they'll give them to us for $17.50. This is going to be the company PT shirt. And we're all shaking our heads going, well, I'm in Iraq 20 or 15 years later or whatever, and lieutenants from that company they take in their PT shirt into, their sea bag to Iraq, and they're going to say hi to him. I mean, it was amazing. So but he thought through everything. And there's a great lesson in that about, I'm going to plan this through. I'm going to watch what people do well and adapt that. And I'm going to watch what people don't do well, and obviously either not do it or adapt it so that I can do it. But it was a great experience. I mean, if you're having a bad day as an instructor at TBS, you don't deserve to be there. I mean, it was just a fantastic experience. And I'll tell you the other thing, I think a lesson learned is, I've watched, and all of us, myself included, you're a lieutenant in training, you don't know anything. And I've made my share of dumb lieutenant, student lieutenant mistakes but I've watched some unexperienced lieutenants make some phenomenal decisions. And the lesson to me was, there's something to be said for people who aren't encumbered by experience. So just because somebody's a lance corporal or a second lieutenant doesn't mean they don't have good ideas.
Right.
And, with a lot of experience. And you should try to listen to your Marines as much as possible. And, and if they don't have a good idea, you don't need to crush them. Just sit there and say, okay, hey, maybe if we had done it, or we should do it this way, and here's why. Mm-hmm. And next time you want them coming back to you, you don't want to discourage them from coming to you with good ideas.
Right. Well, that's what somebody told me a long time ago was, hey, the answer is no unless you ask. Because inevitably you're sitting around and it's like, well, what if we ask the SBC about no. He won't like that. Well, how do you know? Well, I know the guy. He ask the guy. And then you ask him in a setting, and it's kind of funny because he's like, wow, that's a great idea. I never thought about that. Yeah, let's do that. Then you look over at the naysayer and you're like, Yeah, the answer is always no unless you ask, for sure.
Yep, absolutely. I mean,
And
spirit's a great thing. You can crush, you should never do this, but you can crush somebody's spirit pretty quickly. And you don't never, I don't believe in that. I think it's the opposite. You want Marines that are spirited. You want Marines feeling like they contribute. And, I think everywhere I've been, I've tried to get Marines involved. And we would do, we did MUSOC later on when I was a rifle company commander. Well, you can only take, let's say you're taking 60 Marines on a raid. Well, what do the other 100 do? Right? Well, no, the other 100 are doing things like building your terrain models or helping you write your order or putting gear in, everybody's important. Just because they're contributing to, they're not just sitting around going, well, geez, nobody takes me anywhere or, whatever. I mean, you got to get everybody involved in it.
Sure. Be part of the team.
Yeah.
Hey, let me ask real quick. Can you hear me? Stand by. Can you hear me
Yes.
now? Can you still hear me?
Yes.
You can hear me?
Yep. Is that an aviator thing or what?
No. I had a mute button on my deal. I'm sitting there, a cough or whatever. I thought it was muting for me, and somebody told me it was not. They could hear me loud and clear.
We're
my
the grunts. We're supposed to be doing that, Taco.
Yeah,
not
but
you, man.
well, I've had shows where that thing's muted and they can't hear me. But it's kind of funny because we're both old and we're deaf. So
I'm just amazed I haven't crashed. I'm just amazed I haven't crashed this whole program yet.
No, you're doing great. And your internet's good. Tell Heidi, hey, thanks for letting you borrow you for the night. If I had really planned this out, I would have called Boomer Milstead up. As a matter of fact, stand by. Hold on.
You got his number? Oh man.
Yeah. Let's see if
put him on the spot.
Oh, just stand by. Milstead.
Isn't he? No, I think he's on the East Coast now. I don't know if I know he's from Texas. He's a Texan like you.
Yeah. Let's see. Let's give him a call and see what happens. Yeah, Freddie Joe, a grunt called me out. You called me out. You caught me. I thought I've been doing this forever.
Milstead.
Hey, sir, is this Boomer Milstead? Perhaps you've heard of me?
Yeah.
Hey, sir, it's Taco. And I've got Joe Harrison on the line, but you can't hear him, unfortunately, because we're doing a podcast. But we've been talking about you, and I don't know if your ears were burning. One of the greatest leaders that we had, and we both served under. Your Hawaiian shirt, PT Hawaiian shirt.
Elvis Company.
Elvis Company came out, and we were talking about that and some other stuff. But just check it on you, sir. Missed you last weekend, and just want to make sure.
The next company was Alpha Company, and we had lime green bowling shirts.
We did.
And every platoon, we put a name, a bowling name.
Yeah.
Herb.
He's right.
Ralph.
Yeah.
Hey, Taco, did you go to the Dallas thing? I missed you. Were you at the Dallas dinner?
Yeah. Yes, sir. I was.
I'm sorry I missed you guys this year. I'm still fighting this stuff, but hopefully next year I'll be there.
Yes, sir. You know what? I tell you what. I'll call you back. I just wanted to bring you on the podcast for a minute.
Ask him just real quickly. The skull.
Joe and Heidi. Joe belonged to the women of the world. He ended up marrying Heidi.
Yep.
Married way over his head. He's got nothing but daughters. So,
Beautiful daughters too, and a Marine. So Joe,
ask him about the skull.
About the skull.
The skull is alive and well.
That was our XO.
Alive and well. The skull is alive and well.
All right, he said hoorah, sir.
And I'll let you go, but I can look right. I'm sitting in my den. My grandkids call it the museum. I look over my right shoulder, boom, and there's a picture. I can see Joe after our 25-mile hump.
Hey, I got it. I got it right back here, Taco.
It's good talking to you, Taco.
Hey, sir, I'll give you a shout back later. I promise. Hoorah.
Not tonight, you won't. Not tonight.
No, it's late. I know, but you have a good one, sir.
All right.
Semper Fi out here.
Semper Fi, hoorah.
Hoorah, sir.
Here. Can you see this? Probably can't see it, can you?
It's got a little glare to it. Oh yeah, yeah, I see that now. Yeah.
That's Chancellorsville. After you see Millstead in there.
Yep.
Sorry. Anyways, that's the picture he's talking about. That was after a 25 mile hike at Chancellorsville.
Here's Boomer in Iraq.
Yeah.
Hanging out. We were on top of the Bada Bing there. Of course, this is where you and I. This is where you and I lived when we first got over there.
Yeah, I lived there on and off for most of my time. Yep.
Yeah, that was a good time. I enjoyed that place until I got transferred down to TQ.
Yeah.
And what were you doing here?
I was the I&I at 4th Anglico. That's out in a place called Avon Park. We did riggers went out and did tree recovery for parachutes, tree climbing, and then we did convoy ops after 9/11. But the Marines came to me and they want to do convoy ops, and I had a Marine sergeant put that together. That's a great story right there, Taco. I could. Anyways, we did some training at Avon Park. That is that Craig? That's Craig Cook. Yeah, in the Aussie in the middle. Rob Cossett on the left. Just a great American CO of 1st LER. They were out in Cape. That's out near Korean Village in Western Iraq when we were there. But
look at you, Daniel Boone, with the long gun.
Yeah. I took Big Daddy Pearson out with me on one of those. We got to bring a couple prisoners back. They must have thought it was Bin Laden or somebody. It was, no, because they got a colonel and a lieutenant colonel taking these prisoners back.
Right.
They couldn't get them out of there, or they'd have to release them. They had this nonsense rule that, if they caught a guy, they could only hold him for 24 or 48 hours. And, the aviation wasn't flying out there unless it was CAS.
Right.
They weren't going to fly out there to pick up prisoners. And they had to get them out of there, and they'd have to release them. So
did you guys drive back?
No, we flew back.
Oh, you flew back? I was going to say.
Yeah, we flew back, but the Marines are looking at us. They got a colonel. We got these 2 prisoners zip tied. They came to us and said, "Hey, this is the only way to get them back." And I talked to Lieutenant Colonel Cossett, Rob, and it's what a morale buster. We're not going to let these bad guys go, just because. So we were the only way to get them back. So they were blindfolded, and Colonel Pearson had one of them. They must have thought he was. All these Marines are looking at us when we get on the helo on the 53 to fly back. I got some other guy. We just flew him back to Al Assad and turned him over to the corrections guys.
I'm surprised they didn't send him down to TQ to go to Abu Ghraib or something.
I don't know what happened to him, but
look at those good-looking guys
at Cherry Point before we left.
Yep.
Yeah.
God, that was good times, man.
Yeah, it was. But
was that? Yeah, that was Cherry Point.
Colonel Doyle. Yeah.
Colonel Doyle.
Yeah. Yep. Another great American battle captain.
What? As much as I look at Afghanistan and what we did in Iraq, I may not agree with it, but I certainly wouldn't trade my memories of being with the guys at all. No, I'd do it again in a heartbeat.
This generation, as you know, the younger than us even, they're just phenomenal people, and you cannot say enough good things about these young Marine soldiers and sailors that have just put it on the line. Yes. And my only regret in life is I can't be 22 and do it over again. And I think in a larger scale, I wish there was 11 million more of them, like after World War II, because the contributions that they're making to this country right now are phenomenal. I'm talking about after service, not only while they serve, but all the OIF, OEF veterans. There's just not enough of them, man. Like World War II, there were 11, 10, 12 million, people under arms that came home and just went throughout society and did great things. And you just can't say enough good things about them. It makes you, it just makes you so proud. I was really proud, of my dad and his generation and all the sea stories my dad, I'm sure your dad shared them with you about guys. And then you just look at these.
Actually, no, my dad never talked about Vietnam. He never talked about Vietnam until he was walking by one day and Apocalypse Now was on. and they picked up the PBR boat and they dropped it in this lagoon. They were surfing or whatever. My dad walks by and he saw that and he goes, "Bullshit. At you, he couldn't pick up a fully loaded PBR."
Right.
And I'm like, "Really? Tell me about it." So then that's when he started talking about riverboat ops and things like that.
So here's a great American story, right? So that picture earlier of me with Rob Cossett, the three of us, and it's Australian Warrant Officer. I think I don't have my glasses on. I think that's Craig Cook in the middle. If he's got,
he does have, he's got Australian camo on.
The gunner for the battalion was an Aussie, great guy. But they're Rob's PSD. So we went out to one of the border crossings, Walid and Trabil. It doesn't matter. So we're out on the border to Syria, and we're getting ready to go on patrol from the FOB. It's 2 clicks, and Rob's going to meet with this Iraqi border patrol general. The battalion commander is going to have a meeting. So we got to do a foot patrol.
Right.
And Rob's chief infantry scout was a sergeant named Chris Chandler. Right. So Sergeant Chandler, 6'2", just poster book Marine, right? Comes up. Sergeant Chandler, come here. I want to introduce you to Lieutenant Colonel Harrison. And he, great kids. Gentlemen, please excuse me. I'm running rehearsals. I'll see you there. We're going to run rehearsals for the patrol. And he's leading the patrol in 20 minutes. And he's walking away, and he's maybe 50 feet away from us. And he's walking away. And Rob, the battalion commander goes, "Can you tell which foot he's missing?" Right. And I go, "Excuse me?" And, Sergeant Chandler's walking away, his back's to us. And he goes, "Can you tell which foot he's missing?" I go, "What are you talking about?" He goes, "Oh, Sergeant Chandler had his foot blown off by a mine in OIF." And so this backstory, and I went, "You're kidding me, right?" He goes, "Oh, no." So the backstory on this Marine is Chandler was on the initial push in the task force that went in to Afghanistan, right, after 9/11. He stepped on a mine and lost his right or left foot, like at the ankle. Anyway, so they medevac him. He's a Lance Corporal. He's in the hospital, I think here in Virginia somewhere. And the Navy medicine comes up. This is like 02, 03, probably 03, comes up and says, "Okay, we got to discharge you. You're going to be a retired Lance Corporal or whatever." And Chandler goes, "Oh, yeah? Show me where it says that." And there is nothing, right? And so then they come back and say, "Okay, well, you got to take a PFT," thinking he's not going to do it. And this is kind of the beginning of prosthetics, right? Or at least military prosthetics. They fit him with a prosthetic foot, and he runs like a 250 PFT. And he goes, "Okay, I'm re-enlisting." And they're like, here's the this is the honest to God's truth. So then Chandler they come back to him and say, "Okay, what MOS you want to be, an administrator or a logistician?" And Chandler goes, "What are you talking about? I want to re-enlist in the infantry." And they said, "You can't do that." Like same thing as before. And he goes, "Why not?" "Show me where." Well, there was nowhere. And they made him run like a confidence course. So he gets promoted to corporal and re-enlists. And as a re-enlistment bonus at the time, the Marine Corps, I hope they're still doing this, they were giving Marines, like you could go to jump school or you could go to Bridgeport, like an incentive school. And Chandler goes to jump school and graduates Now I'm learning this while I'm in Iraq, watching Chandler walk away.
And this is the guy in the photograph.
No, I got another photo of him somewhere, but he was probably right around that photo. See, he was the personal security detachment bodyguard for Rob Cossett. Right. Well, anyways, so Chandler goes to jump school, Army jump school, Fort Benning, graduates #1 in his class with missing a foot, comes back, and I think it was General Burnt finds out about it, pulls him in his office and says, "Oh my God, Corporal, you're incredible. Where do we get Marines like you? Anything I want, within anything you want within my power, I'll get it for you. What do you want to do?" "Sir, I missed the invasion of Iraq with 1st LAR. I'd like to go back."
Wow.
When I met him, he was on his 3rd combat tour, his 2nd combat tour in Iraq, missing a foot. I mean, and you're like, man, you just like, I still get goosebumps thinking about that and talking about it, because you're just like, what incredible Americans.
Yeah.
Incredible Marines that, the service. I think he's a retired staff sergeant now. I think he finally took medical retirement, but just, 3 combat tours, 2.5, missing a foot. It just
Stud.
kept coming back. Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And then we had many other guys that came back as well after that. So he was
Yeah.
the guy that paved the way for those guys.
Yeah.
Those
That would have
Marines.
been, 05, 06 when we were there.
Right.
So yeah, absolutely. But
Amazing.
just incredible people. Youth is not wasted on the wrong people with the Marines. I told, we had a young lieutenant over here. He's getting ready to go to the fleet as an infantry officer. He's kind of a family friend. We've known him since, high school, friends of my kids. And, I kind of told him, outside of being an astronaut, being a Marine is the next greatest adventure you can possibly have. The amount, the people, the things you're going to get to do, the influences you can have. It's true. Whether you spend 4 or 40 years in the Marine Corps, it's just phenomenal. But
that old saying that people go through their entire lives wondering if they make a difference. Marines don't have that problem.
Well,
not to be cocky about it, but it's just kind of funny. I don't think that a lot of times we have that problem.
I'm on when I was on I&I duty later in my career, right down in West Palm Beach, Florida. We would get people would come in and donate stuff to the Marines, and this elderly gentleman, he's probably at the time, this is probably 2000, 2001. He's probably in his early 80s. He's kind of in tennis casual. I mean, he's just, just kind of an elderly retired guy. And he's out talking to my first sergeant for 30 minutes. And finally, my first sergeant comes in and gets me and introduces me to him and said, he was a corporal. He was given spring training tickets away to the Marines, in South Florida, right? And I thanked him for it. And the most important thing that guy ever did in his life was be a corporal in the Marine Corps from like 1961 to 65, right?
Sure.
Something like that. And it was very clear that was it to me. And I thanked him, it was very sincere for him taking care of our Marines. And he left, and my first sergeant goes, "Sir, you had no idea who that guy was, do you?" And I go, "Well, yeah, it's Mr. Bonatz, blah, blah, blah. He was a corporal from 1961. He goes, "He's the former CEO of Xerox." Like, or something like that. Like, I'm not making, I have the company wrong. It is a Fortune 500 company. And it took me aback because, wow, here's this guy who's contributed a lot, to this country through business. Yeah. And that the most important thing that guy did was be a Marine.
Yeah.
And you're just like, wow, but anyways.
I had a story like that. George Alden. I run across this guy, and he's got Iwo Jima survivor hat on. And he's walking in the mall, and I'm with Teresa, and she has the baby, and she pushes the baby into a store. And I go, "Hey, excuse me, sir, come here." And so we start talking, and that's how we met. He does his PT walking the entire length of the mall all the way around because it's so hot to walk outside. He just does it inside. And as he says, "It's good eye candy. I kind of like walking around the mall." But George spent one night on Iwo Jima, got wounded badly, and evacuated out the next day. What you don't know is that George recouped, came back to the States, GI Bill, went to college, became an Air Force officer, and retired as a colonel. But the only thing, you never knew he was an Air Force guy. He wore the red jacket with the Marine Corps League and his hat, Iwo Jima survivor, and he would go to these events. Well, I had to be careful because R.V. Bergen would come to these events, and he was E.B. Sledge's platoon sergeant. Well, R.V. hated him, and I think it was a little bit of jealousy because the Marines all knew Iwo Jima, and they would run up and talk to George about Iwo Jima, and R.V. go, "Taco, I spent 3 years slugging it out in the Pacific on islands they can't even pronounce. And all they want to do is go talk to that little fella in the red jacket." Well, one day my CEO said, "Hey, Taco, you know this George Alden guy? Yeah. Do you think you could get him to be the guest for the ball?" So he comes to the ball. And then the CEO was reading his bio, and he goes, wait a minute, you mean this guy, I thought he retired as a Marine Corps colonel. No, he retired as Air Force. Oh my God, because you never knew he was an Air Force guy. It just says
Right.
retired colonel, but he never would say Air Force. He just said, you know, Iwo Jima survivor, retired colonel, blah, blah, blah. And then he found out.
I was so fortunate on I&I duty because, you know, Florida is a retirement mecca.
Right.
And there's, of course, there's retired Marines down there. And I met a retired colonel who was on Guadalcanal with Chesty Puller. And, you know, I see you've got to know a lot more of these veterans than I have. But, you know, and it's so sad that they're almost all gone now. But, I mean, it was, we would do ID cards, dial in ID cards for retirees. And we would do one day a week in the Navy. We shared a reserve center with the Navy. And it was real frustrating, you know, in South Florida in the summertime, it's 105 degrees. Yeah. We can't get the temperature below 80 in the building. And there's these 80-year-old people that need one ID cards, but it's dial-in internet 200 miles to Patrick Air Force Base. So my first sergeant and I would always go down there and just remind the Marines, please be patient and talk to the people that are, you know, and sometimes there'd be 40 people waiting to get ID cards.
Right.
And, you know, you just thank them for their patience and explain to them. And this guy looked like something out of Harry Met Sally. He was a very kind of frail, older guy in his early to mid 80s who couldn't have weighed more than 135 pounds. And they're sitting on these, there's 40 people in these plastic chairs against the bulkheads. And I'm walking by and I'm just talking to the group. And he looks up at me and goes, "Oh, you're a paratrooper, huh?" And I'm like, "Excuse me? No, sir. You know, we don't have paratroopers, Marine Corps. I'm just airborne qualified. I hold the MOS," because he saw the jump wings. And he goes, "I jumped once." And I go, "Oh, you did, sir." And I turn around, I look at him. "You did, sir? Where?" "Berlin, 1944. And I'm, you know, now you're mesmerized. And this guy's talking to me, and it's like, you know, I'm honed in on him.
Right.
And he says something like, you know, proudest moment of my life is that when I found out my whole crew got out alive. And now I'm just listening to this gentleman. And I didn't pay any attention. He was sitting next to him. And about 2 minutes into him talking to me, he gets socked in the shoulder by this little old lady. And he goes, "Damn it, woman, what was that for?" And she goes, "Because I didn't know you were alive for 3 months." You know, it was his wife. And he goes, "I was a little busy." And then, you know, later on in the conversation, she hits him again. And "What was that for?" "I didn't get a letter for 7 months." You know, it's his wife. And it was the neatest thing to be around Americans. So that generation who, they don't, you know, guys telling stories about the first time they had 3 meals a day and a pair of shoes was when they got drafted in the Army in World War II.
Yep.
And they were thankful they got drafted because they got new clothes. You know, it was uniform, and they got a paycheck that was, you know, $12, $20, or $25 a month. And you're just, you know, it's
way more than what they made back in the Depression.
Oh,
just
yeah,
a few
of
years
course.
Before. Well, tonight I was on the phone for about 40 minutes with Riley. He's a Brian Riley. He's a friend of my Ed Fitzmaurice. They went through Upshur in 1960, Villanova grads.
Wow.
And they were at Upshur in 60, and I think got commissioned in 61. But I'm sitting there talking to him. He's out in San Diego. I'm going out for a conference, and I'm going to get together for breakfast with him. But he goes, "Yeah, we're in a very high-end retirement home out here. We got a lot of Marines out here." And I'm thinking, I need to go fly out there and go spend a weekend with him and just interview guys while I still can. Yeah. Because I had Hank on Wunderlich, who was the B-24 tail gunner. And a month later, all of a sudden, I mean, he was doing fine. All of a sudden, hey, he's in hospice. Yeah. I'm texting. I'm like, what? So we're at that age that, you know, they're at that age that every day is a gift, and don't take it for granted. So everyone out there listening, if you know somebody that served in World War II or Korea, by all means, please go talk to these guys and document their stories, because they are at that age that they just may have that bread pudding for dinner and just didn't agree with them, and they don't wake up in the morning. So, hey, I've had you on for an hour and 16 minutes,
Okay.
and I just want to show you Scott Gibson played Captain Haldane in the
Yeah.
Pacific. And he goes,
Yep.
makes me think you're talking to Andy Haldane if he had survived. Sounds like he was a great leader in his own right. Good sense of humor as well. Yes, exactly. Joe has a great sense of humor. He's a lot of fun to hang out with. And I can't say enough good things about Joe. Brian Perry, outstanding show. Taco, wish I could keep watching. AA says I got to put it in airplane mode so we can take off. Love these stories. Hey, Brian, you can catch the rest of it when you land and you're driving home. But he's obviously in the back deadheading somewhere.
Well,
But certainly do appreciate you sticking
let
around.
me tell you one more sea story in tribute to my dad, right?
Right.
So, my hero, anyways, my dad would tell this story all the time, and I never got to meet him. I got a letter from him. So I told you my dad came in right after Korea.
Mhm.
And anyways, so he's in his 1st Infantry Battalion in Hawaii, and there's a 1st Lieutenant Harrison in one of the other rifle companies. My dad's a 2nd lieutenant, no relation. So you can imagine the mail gets screwed up. And this guy's a prior enlisted 1st lieutenant, kind of takes my dad under his wings. He's about, I don't know, 7, 8, 10 years older than my dad. I can't remember exactly how, but he was older, right?
Mhm.
And takes my dad under his wings. Well, my dad finds out he had been a POW on Wake Island. And
Really?
yeah, his name's Charlie Harrison. You can Google him. Well, anyways, so my dad, Charlie got captured. He was a PFC on Wake Island, and I've since become friends, although I haven't talked to his daughter in a while, Jane, and got a lot of family information. Gets taken from Wake Island on a hell ship. His daughter told me later his best friend got beheaded in Tokyo Bay. They beheaded a couple of prisoners, and then they basically sent him to China as slave labor for the most of World War II. Was got to write a couple letters home. We got copies of his letters after he passed. Talking about Major, Devereaux. Major Devereaux, retired General Devereaux, was the greatest guy keeping all the Marines together. Ends up getting repatriated in one of the islands in Japan, right? And then back. I think he told my dad he had like $1,100 back pay, and then they promoted him. I forget to what rank, sergeant or staff sergeant. And then, he thought he was a king because he had $1,100. Well, what my dad didn't know was till later on, my dad became his XO in 1st Headquarters Company, 1st Marine Division. So later on, Charlie's a major, my dad's a captain. It's no relation, same last names. And they know they're cleaning out. They're going to get ready to go to Vietnam, right? And they're cleaning out field desks. And my dad's handing stuff into Major Harrison, no relation. And he goes, "There's the guy that interrogated me in Korea. That son of a bitch." So Charlie, this is the more, not more interesting, but really interesting part of this story. So Charlie stayed in the Marine Corps after World War II, became an MP, and was a tech sergeant, staff sergeant. Landed at Incheon. We got a picture of him standing with MacArthur at Incheon, guarding North Korean prisoners with an M1 carbine. To your point earlier, Charlie was part of Task Force Drysdale, and when the lash up for the Chosin Reservoir relief effort, the British put together,
right?
That they had British were up front, our U.S. Army's in the back, and the Marines, I think under a Major McLaughlin, were in the center. And the Chinese cut them to pieces. And they ended up, the Marines were fighting. They were down to about 8 rounds per man. And the Major McLaughlin said, "If you want to try to get out of here, you can get out of here. We'll stall them. But we have no choice," right? They had no choice but to surrender. So Charlie spends months in a North Korean Chinese POW camps and ends up escaping. He's one of the few Americans that escaped captivity in Korea. He led, they put a group of about 18 Americans together. Charlie was the senior guy as a staff sergeant. They were all Marines, except they had a Chinese American soldier, corporal linguist. And they thought they were going to move him down towards where the DMZ is now, because that's where the Ford fighting was, to be like slave labor, you know, humping Chinese or North Korean ammo. And the thing is, they knew exactly where they were. Charlie spoke and read Japanese, and the road signs were still in Japanese, because some of them were, because the Japanese occupied Korea during World War II.
Oh, no way.
The Korean American, the Chinese American linguists, they could communicate with all the peasants. They knew exactly where they were. They got strafed or something, separated from their guards, and went up on an old artillery position that had all these 105 shell casings, and spelled out POWs 18 or whatever SOS, and got rescued. And no kidding. So Charlie was a 2-war POW, Korea and World War II. And then he went to Vietnam and was a infantry battalion XO, and got mad the Marine Corps would not send him to combat again as an infantry battalion XO, and retired as a lieutenant colonel. He lived to be like 94. But we invited him because I was stationed in Korea for 2 years, and my dad and mom came out to see us after one of my daughters was born. And I wrote Charlie a letter and said, hey, please come out here. We'll, anywhere you want to go, whatever you want to do. It was a great letter in response. I got it somewhere in a Foot Locker. And it's just the nicest 2 or 3 page letter. And the last paragraph is, there's no way in hell I'm ever coming back there. Right. I mean, it was just like, I appreciate you, but there's no way in hell you're ever getting me back to Korea.
Could you imagine if he'd gotten captured as a POW in Vietnam? I mean, that would just be so demoralizing.
I think that there's a YouTube interview with him. I think General O.K. Steele did an oral history that's like 10 hours.
With Charlie Harrison.
Yeah, there's no video. It's just audio. If you Google Lieutenant, I think it's Lieutenant Colonel Charles Harrison, Charlie Harrison, you'll find it. It's on YouTube. But my dad was so mad that the Marine Corps did not recognize this guy. The Marine Corps needs to every Marine needs to know his name, right? Which was true. I mean, my dad was right about that, but just a neat, that's what I grew up on, stories like that. That's, I had the greatest recruiter in the world, my dad.
Yeah.
Telling me stories like
Godspeed, Colonel Harrison. I mean, they definitely impress upon us and make us the men we are.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Joe, I tell you what, I've had an hour and 24 minutes, and normally I try to keep it at an hour. I'm amazed that there were 7 people out there watching this right now live, and it's been fluctuating. So for an hour and a half, you guys have been holding the bathroom, waiting to go for a bathroom break. But I can't thank you guys enough for hanging out with Joe Harrison and I. It's been a long time. I need to come up DC, come see you. Definitely got to get together with you. Give Heidi a hug for me.
Yeah, you too with Teresa, man.
And oh, by the way, Joe is an entrepreneur. He owns a gym, so he does CrossFit.
Well, I used to, but
used to, yeah, story. Yeah.
No, we did. Yeah, we did. It was great. It just got old. Get 4 a.m. You're getting up at 4 a.m. and you're in your 50s.
Yeah. I get up at 4 a.m, but I got to go to work.
Yeah, I hear you.
That's a dumb choice of my own, just to avoid the traffic either way. So it works out well. But Joe, I can't thank you enough for coming out with us, buddy. And
my pleasure, Taco.
Look forward to having you on the show down the road. Definitely will be catching up with you soon, and give Heidi a hug. Hang out. I'll be right back with you. All right.
All right. Semper Fi Taco.
Hoorah. Out here. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for hanging out with us for an hour and a half. If those of you who just joined us, this is Tall Tales with Taco, Mitch Taco Bell. It really is a blast to talk to some of the unique friends that I have on different subjects. Joe truly is an expert leadership discussion guy. If I could get him to boilerplate leadership styles and things and vignettes, it'd be more vignettes, because he has some wonderful stories to help out our future guys and gals that are joining the Marine Corps. His daughter was attached to an infantry unit as well as a lieutenant. So it's fantastic to see the tradition carry on with his family. And I think maybe a captain now. Captain Harrison, if you're out there and you're listening to your dad and I talk, congratulations and thanks for doing so well. You folks have a good one, and we'll talk to you soon. Until next week, adios, hasta luego, se wiedersehen, tschüss, sheshini, au revoir. Domo arigato gozaimasu, tando shinde kudasai, ciao, arrivederci, tashikur. In October, we are starting our kind of history series. I can tell you October 12th is going to be, October 12th will be Andy Haldane's nephew. Scott will be on along with Scott Gibson, or I'm sorry, Steve Morse and Scott Gibson. Then we're going to have Henry Sledge, E.B. Sledge's son, the following week. And then we're going to have a bunch of John Bassilone's family, Medal of Honor recipient from Guadalcanal, come on the third week. So October is going to be very busy. It's going to be concentrating kind of on Marine Corps history. So if you're into the Pacific, Marine Corps history, stuff like that, I hope you join us. It'll be great. Until then, you guys take care, and I will sign off with this one. Thanks again to Michael Costanza, who made this for me. I like that one, but I like this one too. Okay, really, I'm going to end the broadcast. Take care, guys. See you next time.